There are over 17,500 museums within the United States, welcoming over 850 million visitors each year. Did you ever wonder what goes on behind the scenes in museums, creating the displays and exhibits we all enjoy? Join us as we explore museums and their exhibits from the inside out.
Hi, I'm Leslie Mueller. Welcome to Museum Access, the show that takes you behind the scenes at America's top museums. We're in New York City at the largest art museum in the United States, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It opened its doors here on Fifth Avenue in the 1880s. This beautiful 2 million square foot building with the Beaux-Arts facade houses over 5,000 years of art. Today we'll learn about the amazing collections here, and we'll visit the Egyptian art galleries. Did you know that the largest collection of Egyptian artifacts outside Cairo is right here? We'll learn about the centerpiece of the collection, the Temple of Dendur, and get a behind-the-scenes peek at how this important piece of Egyptian history recently got a thorough sprucing up. I'm sure you've heard the name Cleopatra before. Well, today we're going to learn about the most powerful female pharaoh in ancient Egypt, Pharaoh Hatshepsut. Born 3,500 years ago, she ruled for nearly 20 years during Egypt's golden age. But she was almost completely wiped from history. What had she done in life to have been so violated in death? We're going to find out today. So let's get started. This museum is gorgeous.
Well, thank you.
The staircase coming up from Fifth Avenue is stunning. How do you get everybody to come in here and not feel intimidated by the structure?
People often are intimidated, especially the first time they visit. I remember as a kid when I came the first time.
How old were you then?
I was in high school.
Okay.
And I came with a class, and I didn't know what to make of this great imposing building that seemed to be filled with objects I didn't understand, and I wasn't sure where to go or what to do. So we work really hard for people to feel comfortable and welcome and to understand this is their museum. And once they can get up those stairs, there's a whole world open to them that otherwise is not open to them. So our challenge is to make them feel like it's worth climbing those stairs.
So once they get up those stairs and they come inside, what can a visitor expect to see?
It's overwhelming. We are the largest, most encyclopedic museum in the world. And so the earliest objects in our collection go back tens of thousands of years. But we collect in earnest from about 3,500 BC to the present day. So that's more than 5,000 years worth of art. And once you climb those great stairs, you can go in any direction and find great works of art, masterpieces, and objects of historical importance in any direction. So very often we tell people, go any direction you want and wander around, unless you're looking for something in particular, in which case we point them in that direction.
Now, what if somebody brings a family in? Do you point them in a certain direction, or are there programs for children here?
There are many, many programs. We give tens of thousands of tours a year. Think about that, tens of thousands of them.
Wow.
We have special programs every day for children, for all kinds of different communities. So we'll often either tell them what's on for the day and what programs they might participate in, or we ask them what they're interested in. If they want to go see the Egyptian collection, we tell them to go right. If they want to go see Greek and Roman art, we tell them to go left, and we point out some things to get started. But our hope is that people just immerse themselves in the museum. They just begin to wander and get lost and take it all in.
You could take a whole day, at least. I think you could take a week, don't you think?
You could take many weeks.
Yeah.
If one It's possible to see much of the museum in a day, but not to see it well. So we encourage people, if it's their first visit, to go where they want to go and take an opportunity to see things they want to see, and then come back again and again. This is a lifetime relationship people should have.
How do you tell someone to go into a gallery like that and really enjoy it? Do you suggest that they read the little plaques next to it or go in and just absorb it?
There are many different ways to appreciate a work of art. You could read the label, look carefully at the image. You could even read ahead and prepare and understand exactly what was this artist up to and where was this made and for what purpose. Or you can just come in and begin by having an aesthetic experience. I would encourage people to start by looking. Don't read the label, look at the image. Just look at the image and begin to reflect on what you see and what do you appreciate and what do you value. Then read the label and get a sense for who made this work of art and when was it made and who was it made for. And then that can begin a lifetime of study of even that single work of art, because in fact, every one of these objects has a history and a story that's fascinating.
Well, I know that the medieval collection, which is gorgeous, and I love that whole space. There's also the cloisters, right? The Metropolitan isn't just at this Fifth Avenue location. Tell me where else people can go. We
have the cloisters, which is in Fort Tryon Park in New York, and it is a medieval cloister. It was built in the 1930s, and it houses great collections of medieval art within a setting that is very medieval. We also have the Met Breuer on Madison and 75th, which is a new enterprise for us. We opened the museum about a little over a year ago, and it houses modern and contemporary art. All of the exhibitions are rotating, so there's always something new at the Breuer, and that is a 9-minute walk from the main building.
Well, I have a little tip for viewers if they don't know. Many years ago, I remember you used to, if you knew, you could go up to the rooftop and just look around. Tell me what's there now. This has really developed into something big, hasn't it?
It is. We have, over the last several years, built an exhibition program on the roof garden. And each year, we have a special exhibition created by an artist who has been commissioned to do that. So it's visually compelling, and it's intellectually very interesting. And it's situated on the top of Central Park with the best view in New York City.
I still think it's a little bit of a secret, but I think it's a fantastic place to go.
Well, one of the great things about the Met is there are so many places to go that seem a little bit like a great secret. And we're like a city, a cultural city, filled with interesting places to explore.
And I have to ask you now, what was your journey that brought you here to the Met?
It wasn't until college when I started to study art history simply by accident. I took a class in art history and was very
Everybody
much
takes that class.
That's exactly right.
That's their
but for me, it
right?
stuck. I took that class, and actually I took that class because I was very interested in a young woman who was in my college.
I knew you were going to say that.
She was taking that class.
She was taking the class,
and I fell in love with the woman, and I fell in love with the subject, and I married the woman.
Oh, you're
and
kidding?
I went on to get my PhD in art history because of that class.
Well, you owe art history then. You owe the world.
I do. I owe the world a great debt.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience for me.
And I also feel, as I walk through these galleries, I feel thankful that there are institutions like this that protect these pieces. With so much turmoil in the world, I worry about some of these pieces getting lost if they aren't in safe institutions like this. Don't you agree?
I agree. Our fundamental responsibility is to maintain and preserve the collections that we have. That our job is to make these works of art safe forever. It's a very ominous responsibility. It's a big job to make sure we do that. But it provides a certain kind of consistency and enduring value to our civilization to know that the Metropolitan Museum and other museums will take care of our cultural heritage in perpetuity, and that these works of art will be here for us for the rest of our lives, the lives of our children and their grandchildren and thereafter. And we take that responsibility very seriously.
I agree. Well, I'm glad that you do, and I thank you so much for taking time today to talk to us.
A real pleasure.
Thank you so much. So can you tell us, how was a temple like this used in ancient Egypt?
Well, temples in ancient Egypt were the place that housed the deity. And that was done by creating a statue, which was put in the central shrine, which was all the way in the back, in the darkest part of the building, in the highest part of the building. There would be a shrine, and the statue of the god would be in the shrine, and that would be a place where the god's spirit would reside. He could come, she could come there, and then it would be in the statue, and the king would offer to the statue. So in theory, the king would offer to every statue throughout Egypt in every temple. In the morning, you would go into the central shrine, open the shrine, feed the god statue, clothe the god statue, anoint various things, and then the statue would be left with the food for the day. At night, the same thing would happen in reverse. The second meal would come, the god would be allowed to eat, he would be undressed, jewelry put away, the shrine would be closed for the evening.
Only one god per
Well,
temple,
no, not
or,
that's not.
Or one statue per
There's
temple?
generally a primary deity in any temple. And in this one would assume it was probably only one statue, but there could have been more donation statues. In something as big as Karnak, which is the huge New Kingdom complex in what is modern-day Luxor or ancient Thebes, there was a primary shrine, but there were also many other shrines with deities in there because it was such a huge place. And it was built from starting at about 1900 BC, and it was in use all the way through the Roman period, which was AD 2300.
Well, I know that it was a very interesting journey of how this came to be at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Can you tell me what that was? How did it get here?
It's one of the most fascinating stories because it actually takes us back to the late 1950s when Egypt realized, because its population was growing so quickly, that it needed to build a dam that could hold back the annual flood. When they went to build the Aswan, the high dam at Aswan, the size of the dam was going to flood some 2,000 square miles upstream in southern Egypt and into the Sudan, and that was going to swamp thousands of sites. So they went to UNESCO, which is the cultural arm of the United Nations, and they asked him if he could somehow reach out to the countries of the world and see if anybody would be willing to help with money, technical expertise, or equipment. Out of that was the campaign to save the Nubian monuments. And it was amazing. Afghanistan, Cambodia, Cuba, and if you look at what was going on in the world at that time, the Cold War had started. The Berlin Wall was going up, the Soviet Union had just blown up a huge hydrogen bomb. The Americans sent 2,000 advisors to Vietnam, and they still came together over something they had never seen. And not only governments, but people. In the United States, the government gave President Kennedy and then President Johnson raised $16 million from Congress, which was amazing and wonderful. But also, independently, the people of the United States raised $1.25 million to save Abu Simbel, which was the jewel of this whole project. At the end, Egypt shared some of its antiquities with the countries that had provided the most help, and the United States, because it had contributed the largest amount, got first choice of 5 temples that were set aside.
Is that the Lyndon Baines Johnson letter?
Yes, the awarded,
about,
right.
Awarded,
so the temple was chosen, and the Met was ultimately awarded it by President Johnson because we offered to house it in a place that would be viewed by many, many people in an environment that would reflect the place that it had been erected in, Nubia, so it would be spacious, architecturally cohesive, and that argument won us the temple.
And even a reflecting pool.
Well, the reflecting pool represents the Nile, which was close by to Dendur. So if you look at what is here, the great limestone wall represents the cliffs in Egypt. The window wall allows the bright light of Nubia. The reflecting pool is, of course, the Nile, and there are granite stairs up the side which give you the idea, again, also of the limestone cliffs in the back. It's oriented in the correct direction it was in ancient Egypt.
So let's talk about these gorgeous columns as you enter the sanctuary.
Well, the columns that you see when you enter the sanctuary are part of what is known in an Egyptian temple as a hypostyle hall. The front of the temple actually is meant to reflect, or at least one of the rooms in the front of the temple, reflect a marsh. And a marsh is part of the creation of the world. So in this period, the capitals are a mixture of floral styles. Earlier, they tend to be papyrus columns or lotus buds, but here they are a mixture of floral type, and they're very, very beautiful. This is one of the things that people like about these late period temples.
Well, now, then there are beautiful decorations around the outside. Is there anything special about those? What's the story also?
Right. Yeah. When you have a temple, it's decorated with scenes that on the outside that protect the temple, and on the inside have to do with the offerings to the gods. Because this temple is so small, there is no really external protective scenes like smiting scenes or hunting scenes. These are all offering scenes. And what's depicted on the outside and in the first room are scenes of the Pharaoh offering to different gods.
So tell me, how do you take care of the temple?
Well, it doesn't look like that big a deal because it's pretty large, and what do you need to do?
Sturdy.
But
yeah.
in 2017, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Dendur's being awarded to the Metropolitan Museum, we took on really a big scale cleaning. We dusted it from roof to floor, and we did that using vacuum cleaners with very soft brushes which weren't allowed to touch the surface. They just stayed very close and sucked the dust away. And I didn't think it would make that big a difference, but it is amazing. I came in one morning after they were finished, and it used to have sort of a light gray haze, and now it's a warm brown again. So
Whoa,
it's really, really wonderful. Objects conservator, who takes care of more detailed cleaning, using swabs, cotton swabs, and I think it was mostly purified water, removed the grime by rolling the swab across the surface on the area right next to the entrance where people sometimes accidentally touch when they go into the temple.
Forever.
Well, she's very thorough and she's very effective, and so she got it done in a number of weeks.
That's great.
Yeah, so it looks wonderful.
Well, I know that there was a very famous Queen Pharaoh that almost got wiped out of history. Can you tell me about that? I think we're going to go into her gallery right now.
Oh, you must be talking about Hatshepsut.
That's true.
Let's go look at her.
You pronounce that name 5 times quickly. This is a wonderful space. Tell us where we are now.
We're in Gallery 115, which is the gallery devoted to the Pharaoh Hatshepsut, early 18th dynasty ruler, who has a very interesting story because she ruled as a king, which in Egypt was very rare. There were only a few instances where a woman took on the titles of king. And that's because the tradition in ancient Egypt is that only men can be king. at several points in time, women changed that. But the best known and the one who ruled the longest and left the biggest mark was Hatshepsut. And
well, how did she come into power then? What was her situation?
well, she was actually a great royal wife. After her father died, she married her brother, which was traditional in ancient Egypt because that's how the bloodlines were kept stable. She was, her mother was the daughter of an earlier ruler, which was the founder of the dynasty, and bloodlines were actually passed through women. So by her marrying her brother, it really stabilized the line. But she didn't have a son. Her husband had a son by a minor wife. So when he died unexpectedly, quite young, he was, I think, in his 20s, her stepson became the next king.
At what age?
He was 2 or 3. He was very, very young. So she immediately became regent. She was the queen. She was the god's great wife of Amun, and she became a regent.
And what
for
does
the
a
young.
regent mean?
Well, it
That's
means
just
somebody
this-
managing the government while the king is not old enough to rule, okay? Until he gets old enough, and then he would take over. You start out by seeing her depicted as a queen, a wife, and then you see her being depicted with a king's kilt, but with breasts. And then over time, she becomes a complete male figure. And
So
it's
she was
almost
very aware of image at this
Yes,
point. Was this because
extremely.
she wanted to be accepted by the
Yes, it looks like she
population?
she wanted to rule as a king with complete power. Now, what is interesting is it was always a co-rule. Tutmosis III never went anywhere. He actually co-ruled with Hatshepsut for 22 years until she died, and then he continued to rule for another more than 20 more years.
So the contributions that she made to the wealth of Egypt and the artistry, I understand she was involved in.
She was a
architectural-
great builder. I think most of the time Tutmosis during this period when they co-ruled was running the army and expanding and controlling the empire, which was one of the largest Egypt ever had. It stretched from southern Turkey into central Sudan, and all of that had to be constantly attended to. So while he was doing that, she was running the administration. And since Egypt was very wealthy because they had such a huge empire that was so stable, she was able to build a great deal. She built up obelisks at Karnak, built shrines and chapels, and she also erected a spectacular funerary temple at Deir el-Bahri. And the pieces that you see in this gallery are the result of the Metz excavations by Herbert Winlock at Deir el-Bahri back in the 30s. He found a huge pit of broken statuary because Tutmosis III destroyed a lot of her material, and we can talk about that in a second. But he found this huge pit of broken statuary, and he pulled all the pieces out and laid them out and reconstructed these statues.
Whoa.
So they're all actually of cores of steel and plaster, and then these fragments are all fitted into place. The best ones, of course, were in the division stayed in Cairo, but we got many beautiful pieces, which really give depth and monumentality to this gallery.
Oh, absolutely. But let's backtrack a little bit. Why were they destroyed?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I don't think we really have a clear answer. But one thing I can say is that when Hatshepsut died after 22 years of rule with Tutmosis III, he did not destroy any of her monuments immediately. The damage that was done, which was removing her depiction, removing her name, and in the case of Deir el-Bahri, breaking up many of the statues, took place somewhere after year 42 of his rule, 20 years after she died.
So later leaders.
Much
wanted-
later. In the Egyptian understanding of what is right in the world, how the world should operate, a man should be king. And to have a woman who was king left that stability and that order out of sync. And so it may have been for some reason that Tutmosis III decided, perhaps for inheritance for his successor, perhaps for his own rejuvenation or strength, that this had to be put back right. And to do that, he had to remove her image where it was visible. He didn't remove it everywhere. It wasn't very thoroughly done. It was not a systematic removal of Hatshepsut. But for some reason, he needed to destroy some of it, and he
So
did.
until this discovery was made, was she more or less written out of history or no?
It's interesting, the king list, she's not in the king lists. She's not written in the traditional king lists of Egypt. It goes from her husband to her stepson, but she's not listed. So she had been written out of later Egyptian history. When they were compiling lists of their previous rulers, she wasn't in it.
This is such a spectacular collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but tell us, what else can you see?
Well, there are many things. We have almost 30,000 objects. Another very important group are the Mekhet Ray models, which were made at about 2000 BC, so 4,000 years ago, which show you what life looked like on the Nile River, a whole series of boats, and how cattle were slaughtered and gardens, and all the paint is original, all the cloth is original.
How did they find that?
It was one of those things. They were working in a chapel, and they noticed that there was a crack in the floor, and they opened up the crack and they found a pit that was full of these models. And Winlock put them back together again. Half of them stay in Cairo and half of them are with us because it's a division, which is how it works in Egypt. We also have many sarcophagi and coffins, which of course were created to house mummies, the bodies of ancient Egyptians that had been embalmed and wrapped so that they could live, their bodies could be the houses for their spirits, and their spirits could last forever. There are the wonderful jasper lips of a queen from Amenhotep III or early Akhenaten period. She's unknown, so people argue over who she is, but she's made out of yellow jasper, and the surface is mirror-like, and her lips are spectacular. We also have an incredible piece of jewelry, one of the finest that I believe was ever made. It dates to about 1800 BC, so not quite 4,000 years ago. And it's a beautiful pectoral that is a pendant that's suspended that would set on your chest. And it is cloisonné, that is, it's gold with individual cells in which stones were cut and set. And they are tiny, so it is an amazing piece of work.
The tools that they must have required.
Well, most of it was just done by hand, and all they had were, at this point, bronze tools. In this period, they had bronze tools, but a lot of it was done just slow and laboriously. But there was a lot of patience, and it just took time, mostly.
But they're in perfect condition. It looks like
this one is one of the best preserved. Actually, it was retrieved from a burial that was actually waterlogged. So it's amazing that it's in such good condition. But it's made of hard stone and metal, and that tends to survive more in poorer conditions. Here.
Thank you so much for taking the time today to
You're quite
show us
welcome.
around.
I love to talk to you.
Thanks, Diane.
From Egyptian temples to old masters' paintings, you can immerse yourself in centuries of world history at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Thanks for joining us on Museum Access. I'm Leslie Mueller. See you next time.